tani do të kemi një lidhje direkte me një gazetare nga Ukraina, me të cilën do të flasim për situatën atje, duke qenë se tashmë më shumë se 3 vite, pothuajse për 3 vite, ka vazhduar lufta në Ukrainë dhe ende po vazhdon, dhe do të flasim për atë se si raportohet nga atje nga tereni, duke qenë se gazetaria raporton nga Kievi, por ka qenë edhe në terene pak më të vështira. Do të kemi një lidhje direkte me Mariana Lastovirja, e cila është gazetare nga Kievi, direkt nga Kievi do të lidhet me ne. Hello, Mariana. Can you hear me?
Hey. Yes, I do.
Thank you for being part of our interview here in Alsat-M in North Macedonia.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation.
Well, we will talk about, first I want to ask you for what television or for what, let's say, gazette or whatever do you report for? Because so the people here know you more.
Well, actually, my name is Mariana. I'm a reporter and also a creative editor at The Counteroffensive. The Counteroffensive is an American Kyiv-based media publication, which basically writes some stories about human-oriented stories about the war in Ukraine. So basically, our conception is that instead of telling you what happened in Ukraine, we are diving into some human interest stories, leading people through their experiences, and this way we are connecting American and international audience overall with what Ukrainian life feels here.
Yeah, that's great. First, I want to ask you, how is the situation in Ukraine? Because it's been more than 3 years that the war that started the war there in Ukraine. So, can you tell me about the situation right now?
Well, actually, since we, as you said, we are living in terms like of war in Ukraine for more than 3 years, people got adjusted to the war. So basically, we are not that maybe sometimes reacting to some air alerts or even some attacks. However, even though there is some myth that the situation got better because of the negotiation process and some talks between Putin, Zelensky and Trump. However, the truth is that the situation is still really bad because even this week, previous week, Russia launched a really big attack on Ukraine, injuring and killing civilians. For example, even in my city where I live in and stay in Kyiv, civilians were killed because one of the missiles destroyed a civilian building. So despite any perception of that the situation is getting better, honestly, it is still really bad. And I wanted to make a note that we don't have to forget about Ukraine because the war still continues, even though there can be some misconception and misunderstanding of it.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I saw the news that also in Kiev was a building attacked and many people, I guess 15 or more people were killed. Can you tell me from the beginning of the war, because I know maybe you reported from the day one, right? You started to report since the beginning of the war. Where were you at that moment when the war started? Can you tell us about the beginning?
Yeah, actually, I haven't started reporting from the day one because, honestly speaking, I'm a quite young journalist because I'm only 21. So basically, when the war started, I was 17, almost turning 18. So I basically went to my home city, and I was staying there, observing the just situation and what was happening. Basically, helping my university or doing some minor reporting for some unit tasks. However, I started my reporting career and took it more seriously, I guess, in 2022 in October, when I firstly applied for some internships in media, and I started to pursue my career professionally from May 2024. So currently, it has been a year since I'm working for the Counteroffensive and reporting from Kyiv and other places about the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, you are really young, and you have started, let's say, your biggest part of your career you have started during the war. How has the situation changed in the ground during these 3 years?
Well, you know, like when the war started, everybody, I guess, was really under constant stress and didn't understand what to do because, for example, if you are talking about reporting and journalism, a lot of things were not regulated during the first days of the war because, for example, there was some misconception of what should be reported or what should not be reported. Now we have some basic understanding of what should we do in terms of reporting, so it became easier. However, since the front line is still constantly changing, it isn't less dangerous because if you are Ukrainian, you are under constant threat of being killed or being injured because attacks are happening all the time. So even if you are in relatively safe areas, still you can be under severe danger because if Russia, for example, launches some ballistic missiles, the distance doesn't matter. So it can just launch some missiles from Belarus, for example, and even if you are near so-called near NATO borders, like in some parts of Western Ukraine, still it is a really big threat. So I think that it became easier just in terms of more clarity. And as I said previously, we are getting adjusted for any sort of stress and danger which is appearing in our lives. So we became more resistant. We became more aware of our safety and what it takes for reporters to report more or less safely. Because of course you cannot evaluate any danger which can occur during your reporting. But overall, there is just some basic understanding of what you should do or what you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. You can learn throughout the way, but still you have stress and you also have fear. Not only you, the journalists, but also the people have still fear because they don't know if they are going to be alive or if there are going to be another attack in their house or in their buildings, right?
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. I don't sometimes you are less frightened of the attacks because sometimes we are not even reacting for some attacks, unfortunately, because if you are under constant stress and you cannot just survive, honestly, and your mental state just adapts to it. So it became easier, but still for normal people it's a huge danger.
Yeah,
usually.
Yeah, that's true. What are the biggest challenges that you faced during reporting from the war zones, or also the journalists? What are the challenges that journalists face in Ukraine reporting during this period?
I guess the first thing which comes to my mind is talking to people. I know that it maybe sounds crazy because basically all of the work that we are doing as journalists is to talk to people. But if we are experiencing some trauma, it's really difficult to find all these boundaries and all these measures so that we are not crossing them. Because there is a high potential, for example, if you are talking to people about some traumatic experience, like I don't know, losing loved ones, or being under debris, for example, if your house was destroyed by some missile. So it's really difficult not to re-traumatize people and talk to them with following your journalistic role. So basically you need, of course, to understand the situation and even to collect some evidence of some war crimes if you are reporting from that side. But simultaneously we need to take human side for starters and consider it as a priority. And secondly, of course, it's taking care of your safety. It is a really big challenge because usually, for example, in my media outlet, you need to go with a lot of protocols and a lot of security proposals in order to travel, for example, to some dangerous places, and you need to consider any kind of situation which can be a crisis for you. For example, you need to consider some evacuation plans. You need to take care of taking, for example, satellite phones or your body armor. So it is difficult for small medias, for example, in Ukraine, which are not financially stable, especially after the US aid was cut off, because usually like Ukrainian medias cannot are not capable of having all this stuff. And what I also wanted to say. Yeah, and also dealing, of course, with propaganda, Russian propaganda, because usually Ukraine and not even Ukraine, but other countries are under constant attacks of informational warfare, which is created by Russia. So usually you need to
filter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask actually, because since the war started in Ukraine, one of the biggest topics were always the fake news, the propaganda. So I wanted to ask how difficult it is to get reliable and verified information during the war.
If it comes to Ukrainian journalists, usually we take the principle that we consider governmental information as a verified one. So usually we are taking the credit, we were giving the credit to our governmental institutions. Of course, if we are talking about standard journalism, usually we need to have like a balance in our articles or anything like a balance of opinions, I mean. However, when it comes to war, of course, Ukraine now is a victim, not an aggressor. So, in my opinion, and every journalist in Ukraine agrees that we cannot consider Russian information as a reliable one. So, usually we are just taking into consideration Ukrainian sources and also some international media which are considered to have a good image. So, usually that's how we verify information.
Yeah. From your experience, what have you seen? How important is to report accurately and to be honest while reporting during the war? Because not only in Ukraine, for the people in Ukraine, but also for the world to see the truth. So how important is it to journalists to be accurate in these times?
Of course, accuracy is a must for every journalist, like no matter whether you are in Ukraine or in the US or reporting from North Macedonia, for example, accuracy is just a key priority for every journalist. However, when it comes to understanding which information you should report or shouldn't, there has been a really big discussion in Ukrainian media sphere, because sometimes if you are reporting like all of the information, it can be a national threat. And unfortunately, nowadays we need to consider this as our priority, because basically you cannot be a journalist if you will be killed, for example, by any missile or a drone. So yes, usually we are just evaluating what is the threat after what can be like some threat of after our reporting, and this way we are choosing like whether we are reporting or not. However, I also need to say that it is not a good choice to not to report about some issues, even if you are even if your country is going through the war, because, for example, there were a lot of precedents when some corruption schemes or some issues connected with our military were reported by journalists, and after that they were solved. So basically, journalism today serves not only as a watchdog of democracy, but also as a tool to make our government not to ignore what issues we have. So probably, yeah, accuracy and honesty are a must for any journalist, even like if you are living in the war.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, accuracy should be everywhere, not only in the war zones, but everywhere where we report. Actually, I want to ask you, because you mentioned something about the security, the protocols that you have to protect yourself as journalists. So I wanted to ask, how do journalists protect themselves while they are reporting from dangerous areas?
Well, usually it's a really huge preparation for going, like if we are talking about some nearby frontline zones, because, for example, in our media, it functions this way that we are conducting like this security proposals to our main editor, so that all of our team is aware of where we're going, who is with us, what transport we are using, how are we like commuting to these places. Firstly, like we need to take care of our security. I mean, in terms of like of planning. Preparation is the key actually too. So you need to understand where are you going. For example, you need to establish some contacts in the zone that you are you want to appear in. For example, you need to get in touch with some locals or connect with local authorities and understand like step by step what will you do, for what reasons, and whether the risk is worth it. Because usually there are some occasions when you don't need to actually go to nearby frontline territories in order to have an article, or even like to have any other sort of media piece. Establishing contexts and just evaluating whether the risk is worth it are the biggest, I guess, challenges in terms of having security. But honestly speaking, it's still like, and also, by the way, monitoring some, for example, Telegram channels or governmental reports in terms of attacks, because usually you are aware in advance if it comes, for example, to usual launches of missiles or drones, so you can just be prepared for what will wait for you if you're going somewhere. But when it comes to guided bombs or ballistic missiles, usually you have just several minutes and that's it. And finally, but yet importantly, every journalist needs to go through some medical training, because you cannot you cannot distinguish whether it will come in handy or not. However, these skills can be really critical when you are going to some dangerous zones, because it's not only your security but also security of other people who are, for example, if you are going with a team, this way you can just help and even save a life of somebody.
Mm-hmm. That's true, actually. I always say journalists that report from war zones, from dangerous areas, actually they are kind of warriors, because they have to be they are also emotionally attached, firstly because they are also, the journalists are human, so it's really difficult in these periods, in these times, of course. I wanted to ask about the threats, because I want to get back again to the propaganda and the fake news, but also have you personally, but also maybe colleagues that colleagues that have faced threats or maybe censorship during your reporting?
When it comes to me personally, I didn't have a lot of accidents when I was threatened or went through censorship. Of course, there are some people, if it comes to my articles, that want to delete, for example, some parts of my stories, but I guess it's a usual thing which happens to every journalist. However, when it comes to Ukrainian medias, honestly, and from Ukrainian authorities, I didn't face a lot of situations when people were under the big censorship or under constant threats. It could be, I guess, more previously, like in before Zelensky cadency, if I'm not mistaken. However, I will not speak about that, because I'm not an expert, honestly, like in this field, and just some information which is from open sources. However, there is one thing which we can consider as a censorship, honestly, in Ukraine, is a television marathon. Actually, it's the situation when all of the channels were united under like this marathon, and All of the news which are wired there, I think that they are basically going through our authorities, and that's why they are really filtered. And usually, all of the news which are reported there usually are kind of optimistic and sometimes do not disclose the real situation on the front line. However, when it comes to independent journalism media outlets, I wouldn't say that Ukraine, we have really big issues with freedom of speech, for example. If we are talking about Russian side, of course, there could be some cases when Russians could threaten, for example, to anonymize some journalists or reporters, and usually they do that, especially when it comes to some renowned journalists who went, for example, to the Kursk region or anything. So their private information can be disclosed to some Telegram channels, and people are just threatening them.
That's the only case where there might be censorship or filtered information. You as a Ukrainian journalist, how do you think, how important is the support of international media for Ukrainian journalists?
In my opinion, of course, it is essential, since I think that Ukrainians, throughout their history, they had some kind of minority complex. I'm talking not only about journalism, but also about culture, about some geopolitical situation, because we were considered as as not equal ones. And however, in my opinion, my perception is that now Ukrainian journalists are performing really greatly, and they are having credible pieces of news or some articles or anything, and that's why some support from international colleagues wouldn't harm, because still we need to teach, to be taught a lot, since experience is what we are obtaining every day, even under this situation. And in my opinion, we also can give others give international colleagues also some experience, because we are working in the war zone, under constant threat. So it can be just an equal sharing of information and of experience. So definitely, it would be really great if international colleagues continued to support us, to support our medias, and to support our journalists. For example, cooperating with them when they come into Ukraine, and because they can, Ukrainian journalists can give some basic understanding of what life feels like here, or anything. However, I would also mention that if I could do that, but in terms of reporting on the war in Ukraine, it is we should understand that Ukraine is a victim, and Russia is an aggressor, and that's why if we are reporting about some strikes or about some damaged civilian buildings or stuff like that, we need to understand that Russia propaganda is working, and they are constantly telling us that okay, there was some military base there when it is just a kindergarten or a school which was shot by some ballistic missile. So we need to take into consideration, of course, some of course, all of the journalistic standards matter, but we don't need to, in my opinion, we don't need to voice give a stage for some voicing of the opinion to Russians if they are committing all these attacks and war crimes basically every day.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I want to ask you about maybe a moment or a story that you reported during this period that you will never forget. If you can share with us maybe a moment or a story.
Frankly speaking, it's really difficult for me to choose one. Because usually, like, all of my work is just working with some people who went through really big challenges through their life, and it's really difficult to choose one. But if still I'm given this question, I would probably say it was about my story about the evacuation of 17-year girl who evacuated on her own from Kherson region, from the left bank, which is currently under the occupation by Russians. And she went through a really big journey because she went through some filtration camps in Mariupol, in the Donetsk, so-called Donetsk and Luhansk Republic. She traveled through Russia, and she had a really big journey just to come to her homeland and to be in Ukraine again. And why is it this story is important? Is because she texted me after the story was published, and she shared this story with her mother, who was under the occupation, and she said that it touched her so deeply that it gave her some more belief that one day her home, like her home city or village, I do not recall, will be liberated. And this way I just observed some influence and social impact that we have as a journalist, because telling stories is what making people, it kind of, sometimes it can be and honestly a therapy for people, just to to look at their experience from the side and to understand like what they went through and why still there is some light in the darkness.
That's actually true, because those stories can motivate them, also give them strength, so they don't give up, because the light maybe soon will come. So that's really motivating. Since we are in the last minutes of our interview, I wanted to ask you, what message would you give the world in this period? Because you mentioned in the beginning, and I liked that you mentioned it, so the war in Ukraine shouldn't be forgotten, because it's been 3 years, of course, but it's still continuing, so we should continue to report more and more during this period. So what message would you give the world?
Well, I think that everybody needs to remember that we are standing here for democracy and for all the Western values, and we are defending and protecting them. If the world fails Ukraine, probably the next will be some countries from NATO or Western blocs. So Ukraine is a shield for democracy and protecting human rights and peace. Even if there are some fakes and myths or just misinterpretation of what we are standing here for, Ukraine wants peace. However, it shouldn't be a peace as a form of capitulation. So. Yeah, that's it.
I think maybe the world at this point knows that Ukraine wants peace, and Ukraine is the victim in this story. So before going, because I thought that was the last question, but now I wanted to ask another one. How do you see, as a journalist and also as an Ukrainian person that you live in Ukraine, how do you see the support of other countries about Ukraine? Not just in journalism, but the general support for Ukraine.
I think there is kind of a controversy, honestly, in this topic, because now for example, previously one of security guarantees and one of our biggest partners is acting not in the best way. If you're talking about the US, for example, now they are, in my opinion, they're letting us down, honestly, because they are just constantly forcing us into some concessions, whereas Russia is not giving up on anything. However, when it comes to ordinary people and Europe itself, I think that still this support exists, and now it matters as much as it have never mattered before. since we appeared in the situation when we can lose. In my it's my perception of it, because if just other countries give up on Ukraine, then definitely it would be really difficult for us to defend ourselves. But when I went to different countries, all of the people were expressing a really big support to us, and it's just warming our hearts, understanding that there are some people who still believe that the good side should prevail.
Yeah, that's true. Mariana, thank you so much for being part of our interview, of our program, and you gave us a lot of information, how you report and how is the situation from there, so thank you very much for being part.
Thank you.